is Caroline Stokes, and I'm the CEO of Forward. Over the month of September and October, I am bringing people together that have amazing insights and thoughts and innovative ideas on how to move forward in this new and very interesting age that we're now living in. I am delighted to bring to you today Bruce Daisley. He is known for three things: being Twitter's former VP, driving Twitter's growth in Europe. Also, best-selling #1 author of The Joy of Work, which I have here. This is the UK edition. It's available in 14 languages, by the way. And also, I've just had a conversation with him. He really is an all-round great guy. What he's planning to do in the universe is just, or the world, I should say, is outstanding. And I'm really thrilled, delighted, honored to have Bruce here to share his wisdom and thoughts. Thank you, Bruce, for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be joining you.
I'm more thrilled. So, Bruce, tell me, what is it you're really stoked about?
Yeah, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that I was aware that obviously this question is a regular feature, and so I was thinking about this before. It's really intriguing. I think we've gone through such an interesting year over the last the last 6 months. We've gone through such an interesting decade over the last 6 months that, a lot has changed. And I think one of the things that we may be sort of reflecting on is work to some extent has been disrupted. But one of the, I think it's a disruption probably bigger than any of us fully contemplate. We always, the way that we perceive our place in a narrative of history is we always perceive that to some extent we're at the end of the narrative, and that all the plot points that are going to change have changed. And obviously one of the things that everyone is probably wrestling with at this moment in time is this debate about remote working and whether the office will ever be the same again. One of the interesting consequences of that is if you delve into the system thinking of it. One of the things I saw last week was that Morgan Stanley said is if about 15% to 20% of work becomes remote. So that's just, the people who are working currently give up 1 day a week and work remotely. They say that demand for commercial property will fall by about 20 to 25% over the next 4 years. The interesting sub-consequence of that is that actually marginal prices will halve. So, we're going to see a lot of very big property deals on the market that people are going to be able to see. But one of the things about that is that, there's a gaia network, isn't there, to any sort of ecosystem like that. And inevitably, there won't just be simply property sitting unoccupied, but rather more, I suspect we're going to start seeing that some of the commercial property that previously existed is going to be flipped pretty promptly, I would guess, into residential. And so, anyone who may be into, I always find Paris is a fascinating challenge to some models of cities, because there's people living right above the business district. There's people living above shops. I guess we have that in Manhattan and places like that as well. And I suspect we're going to see a lot more of that, a lot more of people living right in the city centre. Maybe this is going to be something that really appeals to students, really appeals to people in their early 20s. Maybe you can't afford to get yourself a home office, but what you do, you get right next to where your office is based. And in your 20s, you work from the office, and then later in life, you move outward. So I think we're going to see a disruption really to the way our cities work. And why I'm especially excited about that is that one of those things we've witnessed in the last 10 years, 15 years, where property prices have just been going up everywhere around the world. Every city centre has become increasingly unaffordable. And the sad thing about that is that artists are squeezed out. And whenever a city is imaginative, creative, weird, it's where the artists have a hub somewhere near the middle. And, it would be great to have a bit more of the artists in whatever form they take, living right in our city centres.
That's a wonderful idea, because, and I hadn't even thought about that possibility, because clearly you're thinking about the whole here. It's like, how can we make this work? And actually, if property and space is available, it can be converted. Everybody can still make money. But it's going to be more affordable for potentially the creative industries or people that need that helping hand, when typically it's very hard to actually get onto the ladder.
Absolutely, and I may look back and regret this when Oxford Street is filled with YouTubers. But right now, I'm sort of imagining that this will be an incredible revival of our cities.
Mm. The revival is a nice concept, and I think it's a concept that we all would like to see as well, if there can be that passion for that particular area. But how can you see that being relevant to? I mean, for individuals and organizations, what do you think that the upside would be? I mean, clearly you almost have regret with that statement, but what would the upside be?
Yeah, well, look, if we look into the story of remote working this year, I think we started the year with a lot of businesses thinking, "Oh my goodness, this will never work," but we're being
Mm.
forced into
Yeah.
doing it. And broadly, there's been a discovery that a lot of people are reporting feeling more productive. People are feeling like their work-life balance is actually being redressed. They're
Mhm.
finding, and I recognise it's important qualification that I recognise that there are a contingent of people, a group of people who thoroughly detest the people they live with. But let's work on the basis that everyone else is thrilled that somehow they've been able to share an evening meal 2 or 3 times a week, or they're able to just feel like they've got more balance, whether that's caring for their pets or child responsibilities. But people feel like they've established more of an equilibrium, and
Mm.
these things do have a big impact on our well-being. One of
Mm.
the old stats that we always knew is that people who could walk to work are significantly happier. They'll take a 20% pay cut than people who can't. Well, to some extent, we've all been gifted the opportunity to walk to work right now, and it may be because it's we're walking from our bedroom to our desk, which whether it's the kitchen table or in the spare room. But so we've been gifted something that's
Mm.
helping us. But I think the really critical thing is that there's been this dawning realization about this. 2/3 of chief execs say that they're planning to downscale the size of their office, and that is probably the biggest vote of confidence that anyone can have. And you have to say the only way that this would happen is if bosses, chief execs, all of the people responsible were actually thinking, "Oh, I trust my team will get things done when I can't see them." And in
Mm.
itself, that gift of autonomy, that gift of greater flexibility is a really important contribution to society. So I do think overall we're going to find ourselves in a situation where work is fundamentally changed, and we've probably not even seen the half of the societal impact of this. But I think
Mm.
a really big moment for us right now to really debate how we want to create things. Here's one of the interesting things. If you look into design thinking, I was very fortunate to spend some time chatting to some design thinkers. And design, obviously, it's like we all recognize wonderful design when we see it, but we don't think a lot about design. Quite often we'll sit there and we'll say we're aware of bad design when we see it. We're often sometimes aware of good design when we see it. But when it comes to work, no one has designed work. We've effectively created an archetype of work a couple of centuries ago, and it's evolved largely based on the job that we were doing.
Mm.
And no one sat there and designed it. And now, for the first time, people are now being invited to think very intentionally, how do I use a calendar? Is there a better way for me to use my calendar than the way I'm using it right now, which is allowing it to be congested with 40 hours of Zoom calls a week? Is there a better way for me to maybe channel my best cognitive energy in the morning? And is there a better time for me to do those things? I think for the first time, because we've escaped the open plan offices, it's permitted us a moment to reflect on those things that we've potentially never thought about before.
Mm. Yes, exactly. So, and for people to sit and actually be invited, as you've just very kindly done, to invite people to think about this and to reimagine what work can look like. People have been so concerned about, how can we get everybody back to normal in the studio, in the office, and one of the challenges there is like, well, things aren't normal. You've got programmers that don't actually want to go back to work. They're more productive in their spare bedrooms or wherever they're doing their work. They're delivering on time. They're nowhere near as stressed. So some companies I know are adapting to that. They're adapting and they're saying, okay, we know that 40, 50, 60% of our programming workforce don't want to go back into the studio or go back to the office where they can work. And we can trust them because they've been delivering. We're able to get our multi-million-dollar project out and everything is great. But there's also how can you impact that idea of being flexible and trusting to organizations that all they want to do is just get their people back because they're so scared of not having that normalcy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's completely. You've played through all of the scenarios that exist. For me, the big opportunity that really presents itself now, and whether it's Glassdoor or whether it's another website, but we're going to, more than ever before, we're going to value these peeks behind the curtain that we're given, because most certainly so. Glassdoor is a website that allows employees to rate their employer, to sort of talk about their situation. Actually, if you look at Glassdoor, the number one thing that people say is their criteria for choosing an employer is the workplace culture. Bigger than perks and benefits, bigger than work-life balance. So people really value working in an energizing culture, something that makes us feel alive. We actually seem to value something highly specific about it. Now, for the first time, I think, in 12 months, 18 months, people are going to be able to look and say, okay, I've got the choice of going to work at 3 different chocolate manufacturers. This one seems to afflict all of its office workers, all of its administrative workers with 30 or 40 hours of video calls a week. People are reporting feeling burnt out. This one talks very much about feeling inspired to do my best ever work, feeling inspired by my colleagues around me. I've been more reflective, and the electronic burden is actually not insurmountable. And people are going to start articulating the differences of these. And it's going to be a wonderful opportunity, because then you start sitting there thinking, well, individuals right now, bosses, team leaders, whoever they are, who are starting to think, what do I want the lived experience to be of the people in my team? And the ones who create that in an energized, positive, intelligent way are going to reap the benefits. So look, the sadness of all of this is that effectively these things become advantageous for the best talent. And unfortunately, the people who are, less fortunate and less at the top of the pyramid maybe pay the price. But I think, generally what we've discovered, that whether it's the arms race for better working conditions or better culture at destination employers, it can pull the standards up. It can pull the benefits and the focus on these things up across the whole of the labour market. So I'm optimistic that we're going to get, over time, a degree more transparency on what this looks like. And hopefully a lot of us will start feeling, okay, actually, I'm going to go and work there because their work-life balance, their culture seems better, even if the consequence is that maybe it's slightly less paid than where I'm previously at.
Yeah, a lot of people do actually want to have that scenario where they're not working 18-hour days. They're able to spend time with their family, have dinner with their family, and things like that. So very well said. Thank you for passing that in such a great way.
Most certainly, and there's a lot of people right now who are saying, okay, I want to keep a bit of what I've taken on over the last few months. I've actually enjoyed people, my dog remembering who I am. I've enjoyed sort of moments of connecting with these strangers that I live with. And, so I do believe that a few of us, if we're in the position, will start saying, I saw a guy on Twitter, and he said, I spend about $70 every day getting a train, going into the city I work in, buying a sandwich, coming home. He said, I'm starting to wonder whether that's $70 well spent. And I think, it's a really sort of interesting cost-benefit analysis that none of us have ever been able to contemplate in the past.
No, because it was just a way of life. That was it. It was there was no way, there was no other opportunity or possibility. So let me ask you, you're clearly an advocate for a better way of doing things, but I want to ask you, how would you define yourself, and how do you create good trouble? What is your kind of niche, would you say?
Yeah. Look, I feel very passionately that I'm incredibly fortunate individual, and I want to try to ensure that a lot of the energy that I've got is directed towards productive things. I've just yesterday qualified on former Vice President Al Gore's climate reality program. So I'm going to be working on that. And one of the things you have to commit when you join that program is that you have to commit that you're going to be trying to spread the word. The really interesting thing, the evolution, is that when former Vice President Gore did his first presentation, The Inconvenient Truth, 15 years ago, there was no solution to this. It was this horrible existential threat that, to some extent, unless we called pulled the emergency cord on the Economy Express, we were heading towards disaster. Fascinatingly, now there are solutions. You know, the exponential increase of renewable power and has for the first time really given us a benefit where renewable energy is below grid parity on about 90% of the world. So in the UK, we've got significant amounts of offshore wind. Across the US, pretty much the entire country is suited to solar power being cheaper. And so it creates this strange thing where even countries which are climate deniers broadly, the government in Poland, for example, are climate deniers, but they've just decommissioned a lot of their coal power because solar's cheaper. And so I think for the first time, we're in this situation where anyone who's seeing these bleak and terrifying images from San Francisco and of the sort of the orange sky in San Francisco, and we're sitting there thinking climate change isn't something that's coming to us; it's something that's happening to us. And for the first time, I believe that there's a real opportunity for an optimistic, forward-looking message. And if we can just bring a degree of urgency to the way we're adopting these things across the US, if we can just get the US electricity grid to be renewed so that anyone can get themselves a couple of solar panels, 3 solar panels. People have got wonderful weather there and the opportunity to put these things on their roofs where anyone can pay electricity back to the grid. Immediately, we start getting to a situation where a modern grid creates loads of jobs, loads of blue-collar jobs, really effective jobs, and effectively can be a really strong boost to the economy. So for the first time, I think the Green New Deal is only a couple of years old, but for the first time, we're sitting there going, actually, there are solutions to this, and there are solutions to this that will give the economy, post-COVID economy, the most extraordinary boost. So I was thrilled to qualify from that training, and I'm going to try and dedicate a lot of my time to doing sessions I'm going to try and do sessions for about 10 companies during October. So look, if anyone's interested in me doing that to them, by all means, get in touch via my website. But that's the plan, really.
That's wonderful. That is truly wonderful. That is big, good trouble, and that's wonderful. You're driven to make the world a better place in so many different ways. So thank you. I'm glad that you're doing that because you are so prolific and so driven. So it's fantastic. My very last question is: how would you? What would you advise or guide individuals and organizations from this point on how they are able to change and adapt, either in the workplace or clearly with what you're doing with former Vice President Al Gore? Because together they are intertwined. They may not seem that way, but they are. It's about the future of our lives. It's the future of how we operate. So, what advice or what guidance? What's one step would you ask viewers, listeners to take to change the world?
Yeah, I've just been listening in the last couple of weeks. I've just been listening to Maria Konnikava's book, and Maria Konnikova is a psychologist, a writer turned poker player. And she sort of reflected on the fact that she turned from a journalist into a sort of tournament-winning poker player. Wow. And it's a really, really fun book. It's sort of got some wonderful things along the way. And one of the things she reflects upon is that quite often there's a cognitive bias that we all fall foul of, that we watch what's happening for long enough until we think we know what's happening, and then we stop watching what's happening. And so we watch, we make our conclusion, we feel very proud for ourselves. Anything we see subsequent to that, we start seeing in terms of whether it confirms our hunch or we dismiss it out of hand as it must be a fake signal. And she says her lesson about becoming a tournament-winning, prize money-winning poker player was that the secret of success is you don't stop listening. Because she said, the world, our jobs, the economy, keeps sending you signals, and often it's the mistake we make where we stop listening to the signals that means that her opponents around the table, they lose. And she said quite often something will change later on, and it changes my perspective in a game of poker. And as a metaphor, it's a really interesting one because I think we're all guilty of wanting to have the surety of reaching a conclusion And so we follow what's happening. Right, I've seen this before. Yeah, here's what's happening. Here's what we do. And her brilliant metaphor of poker is that it just allows her to see that played out 1,000 times rather than we see it played out sort of 10, 20 times a year. And it's an interesting metaphor. So I think, that's really critical for me. Right now, I chatted to someone on my podcast and he said, with regards to what happens next with work, he said, it's not a time for answers, it's a time for experiments. And I thought, that's really a perfect articulation of where we actually are. That, no one knows whether work will go fully remote or whether we'll become a Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, or we'll become a Monday, Friday, or whatever we'll become. No one knows. And so as a consequence of that, saying to everyone around you, let's start doing some experiments. Maybe we get together and we just work together once a week in a room. Maybe we all travel back to the office. Maybe we just have teams, squads that work on certain projects. And I think it's a time for experimentation. Keep listening to the cards on the table. Seems to be
listening to the
quite
cards on
helpful.
the table. That's a really, really nice metaphor, because clearly, if she's like so focused and listening and watching and won't let go, she's able to see the flow and she's able to react in the moment rather than just thinking, oh yeah, I've got a great set of cards here, and then losing. Nobody
It's
wants
really
to lose.
interesting, actually. It's really interesting, actually. I think we're so preoccupied and war metaphors live so indelibly in the way that we think about strategy, business.
You said
success.
squad. I heard you.
Yeah. But we, these war metaphors. Yeah, exactly. And she said she asked one of her a very successful poker player, the way he saw poker, and he said it's like jazz. You need to watch what's happening around the table and you respond to it. It's not about going in and trying to win necessarily, because if you try and win every game, you become an aggressive idiot who doesn't know when to stop, when to go. He says it's more like jazz. And I thought, that's really interesting, because so often we witness people who are that bombast-filled, aggressive, testosterone-charged fool. And sometimes we see them winning. And then we sit there thinking mournfully, is that what I need to be? Do I need to be more of a douche to sort of succeed here? And actually, rather, if we can be, I think, a little more focused on reading the room, treating it like jazz, not war, actually, there seems to be something really potent in that.
I love that.
Good book.
I love that. What a great parting thought. Listen, play jazz, not war. Bruce, you've been a phenomenal guest. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.